I had a couple questions about lighting indoors. You need a lot of light for your plants indoors. You're trying to imitate the sun, but you also have to be careful when you're growing indoors that you don't give your plants too much light. So there's a little bit, it's a little bit tougher growing indoors. You got to keep an eye on things, see how things are going. But I'll show you the lights that I'm using down here and what you should look out for. So here's the lights that I'm using. So I have one bank up there, so there's a few fluorescents there. Fluorescent here, this one right here, going along here. There's four up there normally, one's burnt out, but right now there's four there. And on the bottom here, there's four here as well. And then also the vertical one, let's see if I can zoom out a little. Yeah, this one here is a vertical light that is aimed at these plants on the wall here. And this one here, this long one, is just aiming at the plants down here, along with this one as well. It's kind of just giving light to all of these plants. And let's see if I can show you this one. And this one here, it's also another burnt out bulb. There's normally two there, but right now there's just the one. This guy needs to be replaced. And that's giving light to actually the tank. I have plants in the tank. Light to these plants here. All the morning glory, these vines here are morning glory, so it's lighting all these up. These ones coming down, and also these taller plants here. So what I like to do with the lighting as well is position them a little bit differently. So if you see this rack has less room, this one is has a lot more room than the other ones. The reason I do that is because as the plants grow, I usually start them, for example, actually I think this year, this one was higher up. This rack was higher. I started my plants, dropped it down a little bit. So now the plants are growing up to that point, and when they hit that point, I put them on the bottom rack, which has even more room. And then finally over here, I have another rack with a lot of room. So you don't want all the racks at the same height, because you're going to have a run into that problem that all the plants are starting to get burned from the light. You got to keep moving them. And when they get really tall, I put them out here. So like these bananas and these bird of paradise, I put them out here and they're still getting this light from here. So they can grow tall, but they still have light. And same with this one here. This one's kind of giving light to these taller, the monsteras, and the taller plants along the bottom here. Yeah, so that's the lights that I'm using right now. Just mainly, I'm just sticking with the fluorescents. I used LED lights in the past, but they don't really give off light. So if I don't know if I have my LED light here anymore, but if I use the LED light, this rack would have to be much closer to the light, and then I can only grow small things. For example, microgreens, lettuces. It's good for starting seeds. It's energy efficient, but I find that the LEDs have put out enough light to, for example, grow all of this food, all this, and all these plants. You need a very high-powered LED, probably coming from the top, on each rack, from the sides. And that would cost a lot of money. I mean, yeah, I'm using a little bit more energy, but these are giving a full spectrum of light. So for blooming, from growing, for everything, this is pretty decent. But with LEDs, you'd have to be careful. Now you need a different spectrum for different stages of growth. Whether it's growing plant, growing the green, then you want a different spectrum for the for blooming. There's a whole science that goes into it. You have to look into it. But that's why I just like to stick with the white fluorescence, and it works. I mean, these plants are healthy, they're okay. Only thing I gotta watch out for is we don't want them to get burned. So I gotta keep moving plants around so that nothing gets burnt, and also things don't get too laggy, looking for light. So it's just a balance that you have to find. Like this tomato here, for example, you see how high it is to the light. Like this is the top, so it's almost touching the light, and you can see the leaves on it are starting to curl. That means we're getting too much light. That's one sign of getting too much light, is curled leaves. And the other sign is down here. Let's see if we can show you. So if you look at the color, down here is like a darker green, then up here is almost like has a yellow tinge to it, and it's across the board. So you see from the top, it's almost like all the tops are starting to turn yellow. So what that means is this light here is giving off too much light, or the plants are getting too close to it. And you usually notice that on the tops. The tops start getting yellow and the bottom isn't. That means you're getting too much. This is another thing that I have in my grow area here. So this here is just a bunch of switches. These are switches that control the lights. So my lights are all coming in here, wrapping around. They're plugged in the back, and each switch controls the outlet. So they're plugged into this device. I think it's called a switch bank or something like that. You can get them on eBay or used. They used to be used for PCs, so you can control the monitor, the printer. You can turn them on and off without having to unplug them. So for example, if I flick the switch, it turns off the light here. I can show you that. And then the next one, it turns off this light. And then here's, I think, this one here. So the reason I have that in there, it just makes it easier for me to access the lights if I have to, for some reason, move them around. Everything is plugged in here, all my lights are here. So rather than me going to digging in back there, trying to figure out which light goes where, after the timer, I just come here, I can quickly turn it off, the light that I need turned off, and then for some reason I had to move it, I can just unplug it from the back there and move the light. And also this whole device, this whole box is plugged into the timer. So when the timer turns the lights on, all the lights come on and all the lights turn off. If for some reason I want to change the cycle or change which lights are on, only those lights will turn on rather than all of them. So it just gives me more flexibility over and more control over the lights, and makes my life a lot easier rather than having to move all the plants and dig behind them looking for wires and figuring out which one goes where. I can just go here and control it, and it's actually the perfect amount here. I think one of these is actually extra that doesn't control anything right now. I had my pump on there for the hydroponic tower earlier, but I just keep that on all the time, so I don't need this switch. So that means I can connect one more light into there without any issues.